Hello, I'm Barbara Shaw, and here is some more of my very early work, which I used to take photos of and cut out the image and then stick them onto cards. So here are some of my experiments. The boat was painted, but I've added quite a few little bits of scraps of fabric where I've been working on the sea to get the waves. Then the deck chairs were an experiment to see if I could actually get in some shadows of people and work on perspective. And this was a very early one of the sea, which is quite stilted now, but it taught me how to layer pieces, and I've just started fraying the edges as well. And the beach huts was a fascinating exercise to, again, work on perspective, but also to get the textures of the sand in there and the sea in the distance. So there is a bit of paint in the sky there, but I've used fabrics here and stuck them on rather than stitched them. Now here I focused on birds, and this is a very early blue tit where I haven't really understood how to shape the bird to get it round. And there's a thrush. Again, I'm still learning about actually getting the features correct, and his beak is a bit awkward looking. There's a butterfly on some marjoram. Again, I tried to focus on the habitat of the creatures. And here's a speckled wood butterfly, again stuck with little scraps, but trying to actually indicate that it is on the woodland floor. And this was a semi-abstract one of autumn leaves. This is a very early picture here where I've stitched into the picture. And again, an early one where I've used quite a lot of different gauze to get the effect of the flowers being softly shaped. And the iris, I was learning about colours and shading and putting in lilac shadows rather than grey. So you can see the flower there and the bud, but I don't think that I've got the stem as long as it should be, so because it looks truncated there. Then this is part of a wildflower meadow, the thistle. Another meadow. These were the first roses that I tried to do to understand about putting in thorns and details. But again, the composition is quite stilted. And here's lavender, an experiment in adding lots of different materials there to the lavender. The pig was as a result of going to visit a farm where the pigs were rolling around in the mud. So this is a Gloucester Old Spot pig, and it took me quite a long time to work out the shading around his face there, how to get the bulk of him portrayed. Now this sheep was a disaster, and I ended up throwing him away afterwards. Totally wrong and looks quite scary. The barn owl was an experiment on how to actually get his feathers right. I ended up cutting up some tweed at a diagonal, and that seemed to work quite well for the feathers. And this wildflower meadow was the most complex picture that I created, and all the different plants which I tried to have all in flower at the same time. And the roses is quite a pretty picture, but people mistake it for peonies, so I'm not sure I've got that one quite right. This is an early snowdrops. There's a bit of paint in the background, but I had some really lovely sparkly fabric which I introduced here to give the impression of frost. And the poppies was a bit of a disaster to begin with, because I put the poppies on, the red of the poppies on, and then decided to paint the background afterwards, and it was much too dark. So I've added lots of different stems or little pieces of wool to give the impression that it's in a cornfield, which then actually looks all right. And here's some of the pictures of the kites that I've done, an early portrait. So this was a very early kite, and you can see that just very basic layers of fabrics there. It's almost pen and ink with a bit of fabric on the kite. These were some of the early pictures with organza ribbon. You can see I'm trying to introduce some softness by fraying the edges of the fabrics. You can see here how effective it is. Well, the lavender fields there, and all the distant clouds or mountains are pieces of organza ribbon. So again, little bits of the wildflower meadow. So there's the mouse in there, some leaves, and the daffodils are quite an early one as well. And this is an experiment here to chop up a piece and see what it looks like in columns. Another bit of the wildflower meadow with one of the first bees. This one was on velvet, which I don't normally use, and it has to be seen in the right light, otherwise it just looks dull and boring. The poppies were very large, so painted background, and then lots of fabric here. And in the blackberries, I've used some old silk ties for the berries to get this lovely free impression of them. So more work, experimenting and adding different bits of sparkly fabric to see what would happen. So that's in the apple there, and half an apple. It's a dragonfly, and that was the first sheep that I stitched, and the rooster. And I tried to work out about how to get the feathers, so that was quite interesting to portray feathers for the first time. Another still life. You can see the still life there. Cup and saucer was quite different. My sofa. The outside of my house, which was painted, and then I added some fabric onto the top of it. This was an experiment of a skyscraper, just a semi-abstract piece. And some of these are experiments as well, so a botanical study, all in fabric. And that was abstract amber, and almost abstract for the rocks and pebbles at the beach.